Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant. I hope you're doing well. We've got another interesting topic for you. We're going to talk about, we've come a long way, baby, the evolution of animal training practices. And this was inspired by one of our tower talks. So I got to give Al a shout out for that. This was a topic that he kind of brought up with a question at the end of one of our tower talks, and it got me thinking about just how much things have changed, and hopefully we're going to explore that with some video examples today. So if you haven't joined us before, let me explain a little bit about what we do here. This is called You Be the Behavior Consultant. It's a live stream I try to do most Mondays, and this is how it works. I have a topic for discussion. I have a few questions, hopefully to prompt your discussion and your participation. I hope you'll join in on this one. I think we've all evolved over the years as animal trainers. I do have some interesting video examples to explore today, so I hope you will enjoy those. And of course, we're going to recap it all at the end. We like to keep it to an hour so that you can have a little fun learning about animal training, then of course go on with the rest of your day or evening as we finish up our topic. So what are we going to discuss today? We're going to talk about the evolution of our animal training practices. And all right, we've got a lot of our regulars joining us, and I see, Al, you're on the list here. Hopefully you heard me at the top of the hour saying that this was inspired by our conversation in our Tower Talk on Tuesday, where you asked the question of what would I have done in the past versus what I did recently to address a certain behavior challenge. And that's really what inspired this topic today. So we're going to do a little exploration of that. Hopefully you will all enjoy this. So here are my questions to prompt some discussion. What have been some of the most significant changes in how we approach animal behavior in the last 2 decades? And, you know, maybe you haven't been training for 2 decades, but that's okay. I'm sure your training has evolved no matter how long you've been in the industry. And what are you doing differently as an animal trainer from what you did in the past? And maybe how do shifts in how we talk about training, maybe your philosophical approach, some of the specific practices you're doing, reflect some deeper scientific advancement? Because we do talk a lot about that in our animal training here when we talk on this platform. All right, and so we've got some great people here joining us, so hopefully you'll give your insights as we get going here. So the first thing I thought we'd address is that we've really tried to focus on getting away from some practices that I know I was taught to use a lot. So we're really getting away from procedures that are reductive to really focusing on constructional. And so what does that mean? So I think one of the things I was taught to use a lot, and maybe some of you folks were as well, was really to use a lot of extinction, a lot of differential reinforcement. So maybe differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors or alternative behaviors when we weren't seeing the behavior we wanted. So what do I mean by that? So I think one of the phrases that was often taught to me was ignore what you don't like, reinforce what you don't like. That would be sort of a simple way of saying that. And I think what we're doing now is we're trying to find lots of alternative behaviors that will produce the same reinforcing outcome, but will still reinforce the one that maybe isn't so awesome. But hopefully what we're doing is by building reinforcement for all these other things, that the old one is going to sort of fall away naturally because these other things are a lot easier to do. They produce the same outcome. And so that old behavior, which was maybe really costly, really difficult, really sort of like, you know, this is the only way I can get reinforcement, it becomes not so necessary anymore. And so we really, really, truly are focusing on building behavior repertoires and really getting away from these procedures that were about reduction. And I think, to me, that's a shift. And I'm going to give you an example that maybe some people here can relate to. So I'm just going to show this video clip, which I think I have shared in the past. But it makes me think about kind of the typical advice that was given in the past. So I'm sorry if it's a little annoying. You might want to turn the volume down, but this is a parrot vocalizing for attention. And you'll see that the person who is the caregiver walks back in the room and the bird sort of is like, oh, you're back. And then when the person leaves, you'll see sort of that distress and vocalization that the bird emits, hoping to get that person to come back. you. You get some rest, okay? You get some rest? And say good night. I do. I love you, too. So I think our past strategies, and I know I've given this advice in the past, would have been to just ignore that, let that animal go through that extinction burst, which we know can be really frustrating, and wait for it to give some other desired response that we can reinforce. And I think what we've been learning now about reinforcing alternatives would be not so much to just ignore that response, but maybe we still respond to that while we're building up all these other alternative behaviors. And I think that probably provides a lot of relief for those folks that have been dealing with those behaviors, because man, you know, a screaming cockatoo, that's a tough world to live in. And to just ignore that behavior, it's also really, I would imagine, you know, again, we don't know exactly what they're feeling, but quite frustrating for that bird, thinking that, oh, why isn't this behavior working? So instead of just ignoring that, maybe we do respond to that, but we do work on building reinforcement history for a whole lot of other behaviors in the meantime that are really, really effective. So hopefully that behavior gets used less. So hopefully that's a change in some of the things that we've been taught in the past. Instead of just ignore the undesired behavior and reinforce something else, we don't necessarily just ignore that undesired response. So another change has been beyond only positive reinforcement. I think this view was really drilled into our brains quite a bit. I know it was what I had been taught. So our early approaches restricted us to positive reinforcement only, and pretty much excluding us from the notion that we could use a negative reinforcement procedure, at least intentionally. I think we were using it probably unknowingly, but the notion of that we might actually shape behavior using negative reinforcement intentionally was definitely kind of off the table. Let's see. Al had a comment. Back in the day, we were gathering our behavioral information from psychology to text. Today, we are looking to behavior analysis to analyze our situations. Yeah, I think you're right. I think perhaps some of our disciplines were a little bit maybe constricted, and now we're sort of expanding our resources to help us have a better understanding. I like that too. Yeah, that's great. Maybe combining them a bit more. I think today, as far as what types of reinforcement procedures we recognize and what might be maintaining behaviors, we recognize that many behaviors, especially escape, avoidance, fear-related responses, some aggressive behavior, may be maintained by negative reinforcement. And so if we're not acknowledging that, we're probably ignoring some really important contingencies. And so I think now we're doing a better job of recognizing that both positive and negative reinforcement need to be acknowledged and used based on the function of that behavior. And by doing that, we're improving outcomes and well-being for our animals. So I've got some more video examples for you. Now, the first one is a little bit of a longer video example, but I wanted to share it because I think there's so much valuable information in it. And again, this is an example of me doing some training a few years ago. And I'm working on teaching my Amazon parrot to step onto a stick. And boy, you'll see so much avoidance behavior, right? And there's only one way to get the food. And so it's a lot of superimposition, right? I'm basically saying, if you want to get this food, you've got to interact with this aversive stimulus, this stick. So this would be an old way that I would have done something. And then I'm going to show you how I would approach something like this now. So keep in mind, this is an old way, and hopefully I'm going to show you how I've evolved from that. So let's take a look at this video. And again, it's a little bit longer one, but I think there's a lot of really interesting information to collect from that if we were to evaluate practices that we might have used in the past, or I might, and in this case, I had used in the past based on the knowledge I had then. Obviously, I know some things now that have changed the way that I train. Okay, so I'll let you watch this, and you're free to comment. Gosh, I have so many thoughts when I watch this today. And Annetta says, I did exactly the same. Feels like a million years ago now, thinking of all the things we have learned over the last few years, thanks to people like Joe and me too, thanks. Yeah, so like when I watch that, I think I'm actually really empathetic. Like I'm really concerned that the bird's afraid. I'm also getting to the behavior I want, so it reinforces me for doing what I'm doing. And I also didn't know anything else. I didn't know any other way to get there. So it's really interesting. So now I'm going to show you a different video. It's not the same bird. It's a different bird, and it's not about getting on a stick, but it's kind of a similar scenario. So this is going to be with my macaw, who had shown a fear response to this new scale. And now I'm going to use what we have learned about, oh, if there's a fear response, I need to address the negative reinforcement contingency first in order for my positive reinforcement to be successful. So rather than coercing her by asking her for more and more and more and more, using positive reinforcement superimposed over negative reinforcement, I'm going to focus on that negative reinforcement contingency by saying, okay, let's go to a point that you're comfortable, and then have you go away from the aversive stimulus. So that's what that's going to look like with this scale. So let me show you this video. So this is more of what I would do now based on the information that I have learned. Okay. Come this direction a little bit. Go back here. Yeah. This way. Yeah. And go look. So I know that was sped up, but I hope that you could see we didn't have all that hesitation and leaning away and backing off and, oh my gosh, that was scary. And it just was a so much more pleasant experience, I think, emotionally for the animal. Oh, she is adorable. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's a much different looking procedure for the animal, and I think much more in terms of or compassionate, so even though I was empathetic with the Amazon parrot, I didn't have the appropriate procedure to actually show compassion. And I think with the blue-throated macaw, I was actually able to do something that was compassionate so that she didn't emit those fear responses. And so I do have another video example of using negative reinforcement. I'm sorry if I've shown you this one before. I show you so many videos, I can't remember if I share them or not. And sometimes it takes a while to track them all down. So in this one, it's just such a cool procedure. So this owl tends to like to perch right near the doorway of this particular habitat, and she's not very comfortable having people enter her habitat. And so what the folks did there is they, per my advice, was to apply a mirror right as they walk into that space. You'll see in the video, it makes more sense. And so she can see them as they approach, they can see her as they approach, and so they can see what she's doing. So if she starts to puff up, that lets them know, oh, she's not liking us coming closer, and they can back away. But they can also practice approaching and retreating on her calm body language, and so that reinforces that relaxed posture, and that was allowing them to get close enough that they could open a door and then toss her food so that she might move away from that perch, and that would make it easier for them to enter into the space and service her habitat. And so that's what you're going to see in this little video. But again, it's acknowledging that negative reinforcement contingency so that they can address that. So do owls understand mirrors? Well, hopefully you'll be able to see that in this video. She does actually see them in the mirror. So let's play that video for you. And she probably just heard your feet and stuff. Oh, there you go. Perfect. That was great. All right, you do what you gotta do. Thinking about it. Huh? There we go. Cool.
The close-off area, so she's just watching right now.
Okay, great. So hopefully you could see her in the mirror there. So she does, I think because owls are just so, they have such good distance vision. I think she's noticing the movement of the people in the mirror, and she's quite aware of people coming in through that doorway. So I think she's quite aware of that space there. But it was a really good, clever strategy for addressing that situation there, which seemed to work quite well for them. All right, so let's talk about some other things. I think this one's been really interesting. I think I like the words from motivation to potentiation. I think one of the things that I've really thought about is when I first started out, especially doing free flight bird shows and even some other animal training, there was a lot of emphasis on weighing animals to give us information about whether they were going to be interested in participating in training. And that really informed us on manipulating diets to influence that motivation. And there was a sort of assumption that weight was really directly correlated to behavior, which would also sort of support this, we've got to manipulate the diet in order to get animals to do behavior. But I think that view has really dramatically shifted. I think we are getting a lot better at identifying what are the actual consequences maintaining behavior based on current stimulus conditions rather than about micromanaging diets. And that what makes a consequence significant has to do with so many other things, not necessarily just about how much food is in the diet. And again, it's not all about food, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And that, we still love the behavior of training animals to get on scales because it's very helpful for a lot of reasons, maybe, but I think we think of it more about as a health check rather than related to performance of behavior. So I will say that's still a really important behavior in our community, but I don't think about, oh my gosh, I got to get the animal on the scale so that I can train it, if that makes sense. I do have a little video from way back when. This is maybe like early 2000s, maybe like 2004, of a hawk getting on a scale. There's no audio, so I'm going to talk over it. But this was early. I think I had just left the bird show community, and we wanted to train this hawk, and you'll see how nervous he is taking the food, and we were so concerned about getting him on the scale so that we could, quote, train him. But I don't think I would, I know I don't take that approach anymore, just because I don't rely on the scale like I did. But again, back then I just I just come from that view, and so that was what I had known. But I can't think of a time in recent years where a scale has been a part of me making a training decision, if that makes sense. Certainly we use it to check on health, and, it certainly informs us, like if we need to deliver medications, we like to know how much the animal weighs so that we can calculate the right medications, things like that. And we want to monitor weights over time to make sure they're maintaining healthy weights, things like that. But I don't use it to inform me on training decisions, if that makes sense. Okay, let's look at some other things. Beyond food, I think one of the things that we used to, Hawk goes, whoa, free nom-noms. Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that we've also been really moving towards is, what does the animal actually want? Instead of just assuming we have to find the best food item to train, I think we're still in a process there. I do still see a lot of posts on chat groups where people are like, "What's the best food to train a such and such species?" But I do like to remind people that preference doesn't always mean functional value. We really still need to be looking at what are the consequences, whether it's appetitive or aversive, right? Because we just talked about negative reinforcement, that are actually maintaining the behavior. And so this way we can, especially if we're trying to solve a problem, we can address those relevant outcomes, not just preferences. And then, of course, also if we're trying to maintain a behavior over the long term, like a behavior we want the animal to do, it helps to know, what does the animal actually want as that outcome. And I do have this really fun video I want to share with you with this palm nut vulture that they were just showing this to me as we were passing by. This bird was, I think she's quite old, if I recall correctly, and had been primarily, I think, an animal that was in a habitat on display. And so you'll see she's not in super great physical condition, but you're going to see she has a big old full crop. And the thing she's responding to is more of this attention and vocalizations that are happening between her and the person that's interacting with her. So she's more responsive to that. It's not really about food, and that gives you some information about what's a consequence or an outcome that's important to her. But it's kind of a fun video to watch. Let's look at that.
Vamos, Peque. Muy bien. Venga. Woohoo. ¡Hola! ¿Cuánto tiempo? ¡Qué guapa estás! Ven conmigo, ven hasta aquí.
Oh, your crop is very
Vamos. But she even comes to here, and then because I try to do muy bien. Because I try to do the higher perches where she feels safer. So because she didn't like people at all at the beginning, so we started outside, and then I know. Hey, corre, muy bien. Ay, but you're hitting your wings over there. So what I do with her is see the top perches. I kind of do like a different random one so that she moves a bit, because she. Ah, sí, venga, un poquito. Vamos, un poquito, muy bien. I know it's difficult.
Yeah, that is a hard one.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't want to force it a lot.
No, it's just funny.
Venga, muy bien, eso es. Eso es, vamos un poco más. Bien. Hola, hola. Hola. Sí. ¿Qué pasa? Muy bien. Allá.
That's fun. I think what's really fun about this video is that I was told that they noticed that the bird seemed to respond more to Spanish as opposed to English. So I thought that was interesting too. An observation they made. Some comments. So this is what I struggle with. Seems that at this one facility, the team is more obsessed with finding the special treat than identifying maybe than what the animal actually wants. And you love sharing the story of discovering dolphin massage as a reinforcement to a dominant a dolphin in a habitat of 25 animals where the guests would feed. Yeah. So it does take some practice, right, of sitting around and just kind of seeing what the animal gravitates towards or moves away from, and of course this vulture and the responding to people speaking Spanish, they kind of discovered by accident, right, because they do have a couple people on their team that speak Spanish, and they just observed that the animal was suddenly like, oh, moving towards people speaking Spanish. And they found that that was a way that they could get the animal to hop from perch to perch, which they thought would be helpful in helping her build some of her muscles and some of her, moving her wings a bit more and things like that. So, and as you can see, she gets quite excited. So yeah, it's a kind of figuring out what are outcomes and consequences that are significant to those individuals. Yeah, I think we've just had this history of being taught to look for the food item, but yeah, there's lots of things that are important to animals, aren't there? Lots of different things. So it's worth exploring those things, and it's fun. Look at that. That was really fun. What a fun way to interact with that animal. And like you're saying, dolphin massage sounds really fun. I wouldn't say no to that. All right, so some more things we can look at. Getting away from sort of that recipe approach to how we address or address a problem or train something or train a new behavior. So some things in the past that have been promoted is like a hierarchical framework, which focuses on sort of a sort of kind of like a methodological approach, or doing this step first and then that step and then that step. But it doesn't seem to be very individualized or function based, and that can lead to delays, limited tools, or poor outcomes for complex cases. And so now what we really want to do is have our interventions informed by functional assessment. We also look at nonlinear contingency analysis. And so one of the tools we've talked about here is the constructional questionnaire, which helps uncover those meaningful outcomes and guide our individualized planning. And we're even seeing that trade organizations and that have position statements with those hierarchical approaches are becoming they're sort of looking at them as sort of outdated, and they're being reconsidered and replaced in some trade organizations. So we're definitely moving away from that kind of approach, which I think is really exciting, because I think we're seeing that, that's a trend towards more evidence-based approaches in trade organizations, which I think is really exciting. So I'm going to show you some old ways and new ways, again, some stuff I did in my past versus what I'm looking towards now. So this is kind of similar to, I would say, like the parrot and the stick. This was me trying to train a cassowary using food, and you'll see, and it's funny, I look at the video and I think, I wish I had more information, or I asked more questions, because, the animal's kicking at me, and I don't know that I would have to go back in my files and see if I have the longer video. I'm not sure that I did. And I wish I had asked more questions, because I can't tell from the video exactly why the cassowary is kicking. I think I would need to ask more questions. But in any case, what's clear is there's something aversive about this situation. And what I'm doing is persisting with just giving food to try and somehow address this aggressive behavior, because that's all I knew to do at the time. But it's not really it's not going to get me the solution I need. But in any case, that's what I want you to pay attention to, is that I'm addressing aggression with food, which now I would never think that that's the way I need to fix that problem. Definitely have to be fast with our reinforcers, right?
Kita mesti berikan reinforcementnya dengan cepat, ya, penguatannya dengan cepat.
And right to his mouth so he doesn't get mad.
Ya, dan langsung ke mulutnya supaya dia tidak.
Because he's getting pissed. Alright. I've dropped a bunch of that too. He gets very mad if he doesn't get the food. Right there. All right, missed it.
language better. Yeah.
So I can remember at the time feeling tense. And I don't know if you can see, but I'm also keeping myself away from him. So in a way, there was something about it that I knew I needed to keep distance from him. So I must have sort of figured out that distance was an important outcome for him, even though I didn't know anything about it back then. But in my head, it was, like positive reinforcement is the way to go, right? I have to train with positive reinforcement. So that's why I was so focused on, well, I'm going to teach him to target. I'm going to teach him to target, and I'm going to give him food. I remember him eating the bananas only out of all the food that I had to offer him. And that at times, like I do remember sometimes that kicking would happen if there were no bananas left. So yeah, there were so many things. I love how the bird accepts the food after you flinch a bit. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's why I was saying I need to find out. I would have had to ask more questions to know more about what maintains that behavior. But, but again, I didn't have the tools back then. I didn't have the tools, right? I really didn't have the tools. So, so now we'll look at this leopard. And so kind of like what was said before, you have to observe and collect data to figure out what approach you should do. And I think back then, all I knew was I got to train with positive reinforcement and, train a simple behavior, and that's going to take care of everything. But what I do now is I try to do a contingency analysis and figure out what contingencies are maintaining these behaviors. And so with the leopard, you're going to see, somebody demonstrating to me what their situation is, what they're trying to address, and then kind of doing a little evaluation of that. And then we tested something to see how that changed the behavior. So a bit of a, we assess it, and then we kind of analyze it to see, okay, did that change behavior? And so with this leopard, you're going to see that the animal will do the targeting, and it'll take the food, but it takes it in a way that makes me go, oh, there's something aversive in this situation as well, because the way he takes the food tells me, yeah, he takes it, but it's competing with it, a negative reinforcement contingency. So we created a situation where he didn't have to take the food from the person. We could drop the food and the person could move away. And so we basically got rid of the negative reinforcement contingency. So the positive reinforcement could be more effective. And you see a change in that emotional behavior. So let me share that video with you, and hopefully my pre-explanation helps make it more clear. All right, where's my leopard? There it is.
Like I haven't done like a whole lot with them, but we recently got the this double mesh put on.
Okay.
Because you can.
Good. Nice. Very good. A little peek over.
He's super eager. Like he's picked up the target very quickly.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how much was done with him before, but.
He's like, this I can handle. This is not so bad. I don't have to put up with you. Good. Nice. I like how his body language is changing.
You go.
He's like, I know it gets delivered over there. He's like, I'll just wait over there. Right, you can change it up. It just, I'm assuming you're right-handed, so that makes it easier. Nice. Good job. I'm liking that. He looks more relaxed. So hopefully you could see that. And then we actually went on to refine that even further by making it so that the person could be even farther away to present the target, but I'll save that for another time. And so people commented treat and retreat. Yeah, so that the aversive stimulus of having to take the food from the person is addressed. And Annetta says it was all about trying to get them to eat. If not, we really didn't know what to do. It was also so depressing having animals we couldn't reach. Yeah, I think you're right. There was a lot of pressure on us to use positive reinforcement, so we felt really compelled to get them to take that food from us. I think you're right. That pressure was definitely there when we have been coerced to use positive reinforcement only. It's a really good point. Yeah, you guys bring up some really good, important things here. I appreciate all these comments that you all have. Okay, so let's talk about the systematic desensitization counter conditioning to contingency-based outcomes. I think the old views have been that systematic desensitization and counter conditioning are what we need to use to address these things, these fear responses. This is how we address those emotional responses. And I think this often relied on, this kind of passive exposure to these aversive stimuli and suppression of escape behaviors. But I think what was happening, especially when I look at some of my old videos, is that we were often unknowingly combining it with sort of this not so great application of negative reinforcement, but because we weren't allowed to look at negative reinforcement, we weren't really seeing it happening. So we weren't doing a good job of shaping with negative reinforcement, but it was kind of happening anyway. But now we're trying to apply negative reinforcement with intention, but hopefully in a really appropriate way. So we're shaping really carefully so that hopefully we don't create these undesired responses, and we're starting under conditions where the animal can hopefully give us a desired response, and then gradually getting to that place where we can transition to positive reinforcement. And we're getting these really fast transitions or fast behavior. We're getting behavior fast. And it's sustainable, right? Because it's reinforcement based. It's not exposure therapy based. So I have some really interesting videos, I think, to share with you. I found this old zebra video where I thought I was applying this counter conditioning approach with systematic desensitization. But when you look at it, I think you'll find it really fascinating. So yeah, there's a lot of food being shoved into this zebra's mouth. And you'll see people try, and I'm coaching them to touch this animal at the same time that they're doing that, thinking I'm doing this sort of counter conditioning thing. But what you'll notice is when the animal turns and looks at them like, hey, what are you doing? They take their hand away. So to me, that by definition would be negative reinforcement. But when you look at it, you'll see we're not really making good progress. And it's not really getting us where we want to go very well. And this probably explains why, in general, it hasn't been all that successful, especially when it's difficult. So so first take a look at this zebra video, and then we'll look at sort of the alternative. Let's take a look at the zebra. So this is kind of the old way, right?
Touch. Yep. There you go. Good. Touch. 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 Very good.
So yeah, we touched him, but he looks awful suspicious to me, doesn't he? So let's take a look at more what's changed, right? So this video I know many of you have seen before, but it does illustrate the approach that I have used with my clients now. So it's not with a zebra, but it is with a donkey. And you'll see a donkey showing a fear response to a brush, and it'll look quite similar in that there is food being offered, but instead we're going to honor that negative reinforcement contingency and shape what we want using negative reinforcement to actually get to that touch. And I want you to, so in this case, we are saying, oh, negative reinforcement's important instead of ignoring it. Well, not that we didn't ignore it. It was happening there, but we weren't really paying attention to it very well. And see how much faster we can shape and get to the touching. And also notice how quickly we get past sort of that hesitancy with the donkey. So the brush is weird. That's new, huh?
You feed her.
Yeah. There you go. Perfect. Nice. Very good. Yeah, and that's nice because then she feels comfortable checking it. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah. Just got a little nervous. Good. That was good, taking it away before she got scared. Good. Good. Very good. So it's going to speed up here, but this is where the important contingency is the removal of the brush. Whereas before with the zebra, we weren't paying attention to that at all. We were just pushing on ahead. All right, moving on here. I want to keep us on schedule here. Emotions, recognizing emotional behavior is meaningful. So this one I think is really interesting. I know back when I started out, we didn't talk about emotions a lot. We were kind of told that we couldn't really talk about them because of anthropomorphism. And I do remember sort of, saying that word a lot. But it was weird because I think we all kind of acknowledged that animals, had emotions and were emotional, but we just couldn't talk about it. But I think now we're being more open about it. Emotional behavior is recognized as observable and shaped by contingencies. And that basically when we say words like fear or aggression or excitement, that we're basically thinking of those as labels to describe patterns of behavior under certain specific stimulus conditions. And that we can use that to our advantage, basically that emotions and emotional behaviors, if we think of them as contingency descriptors, it can help inform us how to change what we're doing. We can change contingencies to change emotions. And so that's a shift in thinking that can be really useful for us. So, and that helps us with our, being compassionate in our approach to animal training. And then habituation to genuine choice. So I think, again, this is getting away from that exposure therapy approach to training. So I think our old views were previously, we kind of relied on animals just getting used to things, which would, I think, well, and again, this has been shown in research that it can be slow and we get unsustainable results. But now what we can do is we can create conditions where distancing behaviors are effective, and we can shape approach, and we can also use genuine choice to help with that and give us real functional outcomes for the animal. I'm kind of moving through a little bit faster here because we're running out of time. I think another big change, and I know this is not so much like a big, scientific thing, but I think it's significant to mention, is that, again, back when I started, tethering was quite prevalent, and it was used as a way to get desired behavioral outcomes. So if an animal might show a fear response or aggressive behavior, that tool was really quite a significant methodology to get compliance, to basically get the behaviors that you needed. And so I think it's been a big switch to say that, hey, maybe it's better to focus on having birds untethered and think about more about our shaping strategies. What's the functional outcome? Why is that bird moving away from you? Or why is that bird moving towards you in a way that's trying to drive you away? And so if we look at those fear and aggressive behaviors maintained by potentially negative reinforcement, then maybe we think about shaping the appropriate behaviors that we want using the appropriate procedure. And then we start thinking about degrees of freedom and how they can have their impact, so that potentially you shape new desired behaviors that give the animals the outcome that they want. So I think that's a really big, significant change that we've seen in the last 20 years, moving away from using tethering as so much, heavily as a behavior management tool. So I think that's another really cool thing. And then also degrees of freedom. So we've talked, I think a big thing that's happened in the zoo community is, what do we describe as, quote, voluntary participation? I think in the past it used to mean that the animal could just walk away. But if walking away was the only option, that's not really genuine choice. It's still coercion, right? You either do this to get that good thing. If you think about my parrot getting on that stick, he didn't really look like he was having a great time, and that was the only way he could get those good things. So that, I think, is a really good example of positive reinforcement being coercive. And now we're looking at genuine choice, means that there has to be lots of different ways, or at least more than one way, to get that same desired outcome. And so when we have more degrees of freedom, we have less coercion, more sustainable and resilient behavior. And so we can, if we have especially more than one way that's always available, then we can use that to help measure assent for participation, not just tolerance. And so that's very exciting, different change, a change in the way that we view voluntary. And I'm not going to get far into that because we did a really great live stream on genuine choice. Was it just last week? My gosh. So you can look at that one and really get into that topic in a lot more detail if you'd like. And then I think another thing that's been changing is a little evolution in our scientific language, which I think is exciting too. So our terminology is starting to reflect more functional understanding of behavior. So I know in our community, we're kind of shifting away from antecedents, talking more about occasioning behavior. So what are the stimulus conditions that occasion behavior? Because not all antecedents occasion behavior. Some may just be background noise. And then motivating operations. now we talk more about potentiating variables, and we might do a live stream on that. We'll hang on to that a little bit more. We did one on trust accounts, and that that word came from kind of a popular business book, really, not from the psychology world. And if you think about it, and again, there's more detail in that live stream. It's really just a superimposition metaphor. So it's not really anything behavior analytic or anything. So that's a term I do not use, actually. Yeah. So Annetta says it feels more science-based today. So we're trying to be a little bit more precise with our language, which I think is really helpful in actually understanding what it is that we're doing in our practical application. And it gets us away from mentalistic explanations. So we're getting a little bit more accurate. So I think that's kind of cool. It still helps to speak in plain language to help us understand things. I think that's totally fine. But again, for those that are working on trying to, really understand the science, or maybe disseminating information, I think it's good to help have a good understanding of some of the technology or technical language too. All right. Well, there you go. I think we've covered a lot here. So I think I am going to bring us to a recap before we run out of time. I think we've truly come a long way. 20 years ago, animal training often emphasized extinction, ignore this, reinforce that. We've had some rigid protocols in the past that were coercing us into some things that maybe were not always in the best interest of us or the animals. We did have some procedures that kind of told us we got to focus on manipulating diets. We've had a lot of metaphors over the years and assumptions. Emotional behavior was kind of labeled unscientific, but now we're finding ways to bring it into the realm of science. And reinforcement was considered only ethical if it was positive reinforcement. But I think today we take a far more precise, individualized, and scientifically grounded approach. We identify what outcomes matter to the animal, and we design environments that allow multiple effective behaviors to access those outcomes. Reinforcement can be positive or negative. What matters is that it is the outcome that the animal seeks. That's the important part. And that we apply it constructionally and support the long-term well-being of the animal. And so we're really moving beyond recipes, hierarchies, and metaphors. Our tools now include constructional frameworks and programs that incorporate nonlinear contingency analysis, along with updated terminology that better reflects the science. We're shaping new repertoires, not just eliminating old ones, and most importantly, we are offering animals genuine choice through increased degrees of freedom. So I think that's real progress, and we're still really working on it. It's kind of just the beginning. And again, I think that's why I'm so enthusiastic with you all when I talk about these topics. I hope that some of those videos kind of showed you that we really have made progress. I showed you some of the old things that I used to do and how I'm changing my actual application based on the information that we've been learning. So, this isn't just sort of, lip service for you. I really feel like it has impacted the work that we actually do, and hopefully for the better. I certainly feel like it's for the better. I see the outcomes of it. So hopefully you're finding that as well as you listen to these live streams and participate on the platforms that I have for you. So speaking of additional resources that will help you continue this journey, here are just a handful of courses. I actually put down, I think, 11 different additional resources that will be on the page where this course lives. But here are just a few of them. So I did one on progressive, regressive, or stagnant evaluating animal training frameworks. We do have one on trust accounts. So if you wanted to explore that topic a little bit more, that one was pretty interesting. We just did the one on genuine choice in practice, your questions answered. And then I think the one on the constructional questionnaire is really helpful if you're looking to try and solve a problem. That one's a really good resource. And again, we have the whole series on the constructional approach, which has now 25 courses in it that I think you guys will enjoy. Some other things coming up. I will be presenting at the ZAA annual conference in October if you're going to be in San Antonio. That one is going to be building animal training programs that thrive, practical strategies for zoo leaders. I do believe the IAZA animal training animals or the EATS seminar, whatever, that wonderful seminar that we just did in London, the proceedings. So the recordings are going to be available at any moment now. If you scan that QR code, that should take you to the URL where you can sign up for all that. And then I know Annetta and I are going to be in Poland if you want to take an introductory course to animal training where you'll get to train some animals hands-on, have a few lectures, all that fun stuff if you're out that way. If you liked this particular presentation, we do appreciate attribution. There is the attribution. There's other ways to support us. We have some cool merchandise that you can check out. It has some fun sayings on it. And of course, if you do like this content, we do appreciate you sharing it with others. We do have a newsletter you can share or sign up for. You can share the videos with others. They're available for a couple weeks on YouTube, and then they go into our online platforms. You can certainly become a member of animaltrainingfundamentals.com if you want to get more. And if you are a member, you can get your animal training credentials. We have some guided learning there that is pretty robust and a great place to get some credentials. You can join by going to animaltrainingfundamentals.com. We have a monthly individual membership, which you can cancel at any time. We have the annual, which is a 20% savings, and the facility is the best deal where you can have up to 200 sub accounts and everybody has their own individual login. And if that's just too fancy for you, then our YouTube membership is also an option for you, which basically gets you access to a lot of these videos. All right, there you go. I see we've got some comments here. Al says, funny, we did feel we were more science-based back then. We are evolving. Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. I remember feeling like very keen on definitions and knowing a lot of things, and now I feel like, whoa, I had a lot to learn, didn't I? And love all the progress we make. Yes, Al, isn't it just amazing that we can just keep on evolving year after year? And Annetta says, great Monday motivator. Thank you. I know. Imagine what's going to happen when we watch this video in 20 years if we're all still here to do that. We're going to look at this and go, oh my, we thought we were onto something then. And hopefully we know a lot more even in 20 years from now. So it reminds us to be humble, right? Good reminder to be humble. Yes. Anyway, yeah. So that I thought that. So again, thank you, Al, for for the topic. I know you didn't realize I was going to do a live stream on it, but it definitely got me thinking, and it was an interesting journey. I'm sure I could find plenty more videos if I just gave myself a whole week to just explore all my video files and go, oh my gosh, look at that one. Oh, and look at that one. And oh, that, but I can only embarrass myself so much. So, so hopefully, you've all had a interesting time evaluating some of my old videos, but there's plenty more, I'm sure. In any case, it was a good reminder for me too, to keep growing, keep learning, and hopefully we keep getting better at what we're doing. So, all right, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. And again, I appreciate you being here, and look forward to seeing you next time. So go.